There's a moment in every debate when you realize you're not arguing facts, you're arguing against a filter. A filter so strong, so emotionally reinforced, that even undeniable evidence gets dismissed or distorted. I've seen it firsthand. I've spoken with people who pride themselves on positivity, on seeing the good in others. Yet when it comes to one man, Donald Trump, that lens snaps shut. It doesn't matter what he does. He could broker peace, cure disease, or elevate the forgotten. And still for some, the only image they retain is one of mockery or disdain. I've watched this play out in real time. During his State of the Union address, he honored a young girl who survived a brutal attack, and a young black boy who overcame adversity to become a firefighter. These weren't political props, they were human stories. Yet the majority of the Democratic Party refused to clap. Only two stood, not because they disagreed with the achievements, but because they couldn't stomach the messenger. This isn't about Trump worship, it's about intellectual honesty. I used to lean hard left. I know what it means to be swept up in ideological fervor, but I also know what it means to step back, judge both extremes, and ask, what's actually true? The truth is, under Trump's administration, the US saw no new wars. That's not spin, it's a fact. The Abraham Accords, real criminal justice reform, real economic uplift in underserved communities, documented. You don't have to like the man to acknowledge the record. Yet I've had conversations with reasonable, kind, intelligent people who tell me they can't name a single positive thing he's done, not one. That's not a political stance, that's indoctrination. That's the inability to separate personal dislike from objective reality. And that's the danger when your worldview is so rigid that even goodness becomes invisible. You're no longer evaluating, you're reacting, you're no longer thinking. You're filtering. I don't ask anyone to agree with me, I ask them to observe, to judge actions, not headlines, to recognize that truth isn't partisan, and morality isn't exclusive to one side. Because if we can't do that, then we're not debating. We're just shouting into echo chambers. This isn't just political bias. It's psychological conditioning. It's the slow erosion of discernment where people no longer ask, is this true? But instead, does this align with my tribe? That's how you get movements that claim to fight for justice while cheering for regimes that openly call for the destruction of others. Take the Free Palestine slogan. Many who chant it believe they're standing for human rights, but they've never read the Charter of 𝙀😆. They've never seen the footage of indoctrination camps where children are taught to glorify martyrdom. They don't realize that the population in Gaza has grown, not shrunk. That genocide is not occurring. What is occurring is a campaign openly stated to erase the Jewish state and replace it with a theocratic regime governed by Sharia law. And yet, people march not because they're evil, but because they've been conditioned to see resistance as virtue. Even when that resistance is rooted in hatred, they've been taught that the oppressed are always righteous, even when the oppressed are calling for blood. This is the same psychological mechanism that allows people to prioritize illegal immigrants over citizens, to cheer for those who break the law while ignoring those who wait patiently in line. It's not compassion, it's inversion. It's the cult-like belief that rebellion is always noble, that borders are oppressive, and that lawfulness is a form of privilege. And when you challenge this inversion, the excuses come fast. I've heard people say, but if we deport them, we'll lose $96 billion in tax revenue. As if legality is negotiable when money's involved. Yes, the economic impact matters, but it doesn't override the principle. These individuals entered illegally. They bypassed the process that others have waited years to complete. They had every opportunity to go through the legal channel and chose not to so. When people defend law-breaking by citing lost revenue, they're not making a moral argument, they're making a transactional one. That's not justice. That's justification. When you reach the point where you see good as evil and evil as good, you're not just misinformed, you're captured. You've outsourced your moral compass to a narrative machine that rewards outrage and punishes clarity. And the architects of this conditioning know it. They don't worry about dissent anymore. They've built a system where dissent is self-canceling, where questioning the narrative makes you a villain, where asking for fairness makes you a fascist. That's not politics. That's psychological warfare. The only antidote to this kind of indoctrination is radical discernment. Not radicalism, discernment, the ability to pause, observe, and ask, is this true? Is this fair? Is this consistent? That's how you break the spell. That's how you reclaim your mind. Because once you've been trained to see through filters, you stop seeing reality. And once you stop seeing reality, you become a tool, not a thinker. I've been on both sides, I've seen the extremes, and I've chosen clarity, not because it's popular, but because it's honest. And if that means shouting into the void, so be it. At least I know I'm 𝙎𝙝𝙧𝙯. From exposure to reflection. This isn't just about Trump or immigration or Palestine. It's about the architecture of belief, how people are trained to see through ideological lenses so thick they mistake distortion for truth. When someone says, "I see no good in him," they're not making a political statement, they're confessing to psychological capture. They've been conditioned to associate one figure with all evil and another with all virtue. That's not discernment, that's programming. And it doesn't stop with Trump. The same mechanism applies to movements like Free Palestine, where people chant slogans without reading charters, ignore population data, and overlook genocidal intent because they've been taught that victimhood equals righteousness. They believe they're standing for justice, but they're actually standing for erasure of Jews, of Israel, of historical context. This is what happens when ideology replaces inquiry, when slogans replace scripture, when emotion replaces ethics. The left doesn't worry anymore because they built a system where questioning is heresy, where illegal entry is compassion and legal process is oppression, where rule followers are mocked and rule breakers are elevated. That's not progress, that's inversion. And here's the final pivot. When you reach the point where good is seen as evil and evil is good, you're not just misled, you're spiritually inverted. Isaiah 5:20 warned us, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." That's not metaphor, that's prophecy. So no, this doesn't end, it continues, because every rebuttal is just another layer of exposure. Every excuse is another thread in the unraveling. And every time someone says, "I just don't see it," they prove that you've struck a nerve. The continuum, when the mind becomes a battleground. Indoctrination doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it flatters, it tells you your rage is righteous, your tribe is enlightened, and your enemies are beneath you. It doesn't ask you to think, it asks you to feel. And once feeling replaces thinking, you're no longer a seeker, you're a soldier. This is how moral inversion becomes normalized. People begin to believe that lawfulness is cruelty, that restraint is oppression, and that chaos is compassion. They don't just reject facts, they reject the very idea that facts matter. They say lived experience is truth, but only if that experience fits the narrative. Everything else is dismissed as propaganda. And here's the deeper layer. This isn't just political, it's spiritual. When people lose the ability to discern good from evil, they don't just lose clarity, they lose sovereignty. They become vessels for whatever ideology offers the most emotional reward. That's how cults work, that's how regimes rise, that's how civilizations fall. You see it in the way people defend the indefensible. They'll justify illegal entry, erasure of borders, and the glorification of violence, all in the name of justice. But justice without truth is just vengeance dressed in virtue. And when you point that out, they don't argue, they accuse. They don't debate. They denounce. This is why the architects of these movements don't fear opposition. They've trained their followers to self-police, to self-censor, and to self-destruct anyone who questions the script. It's not just psychological warfare, it's spiritual sabotage. And yet the antidote remains the same: radical discernment, the refusal to outsource your conscience, the courage to ask, who benefits from my outrage, who profits from my blindness, who fears my clarity? Because once you ask those questions, the spell begins to break. You stop parroting, you start perceiving, you stop reacting, you start reasoning. And that's when the real war begins, not against others, but within yourself. The war between comfort and clarity, between tribal loyalty and moral truth, between being liked and being honest. So no, this doesn't end, it evolves. Every rebuttal is a mirror, every accusation is a confession, every silence is a signal. And if you're still reading, still thinking, still questioning, then you haven't been captured. You've been called.